Hello and welcome to Chapter 7, the video lecture on settings for social work practice. Now, once a program or there's been a need that's been identified, say by Congress, and money has been set aside to address a particular need, well, the setting is the place where that can be carried out, because just because you have identified that there's a problem and set aside money, well, how does that money actually translate into programs and then bring services to people to help address whatever the problem is? That there has to be a setting for that in which to happen, and that's what this chapter is about. And there's three primary settings we're going to talk about. Be sure you keep each one of those clear. They're referred to as sector settings. Sector settings. There is the government sector setting, there is the nonprofit sector setting, and there is the business sector setting. Three different settings. Be sure you read thoroughly about each of those. I'm going to highlight a couple of things, but they have different expressions, but they serve the same purpose: to get the program, the services to people. They are the settings which then can run and provide those services. And they each have different advantages and disadvantages. For instance, with the government sector setting, one of the disadvantages is that they're often inflexible. A law has been passed, and these government entities are so big that the rules that they have for running things are pretty inflexible. And basically the only way to change them is actually to have another law passed. Now, one of the good things, though, about the government sector setting is that on the positive side, you have a consistent flow of money. So you can count on that money coming in bad times, or even in good or bad times. That money's going to be consistent coming in. If you're a part of the government sector setting, a government agency, that money's going to be coming to you. In the nonprofit sector setting, that may not be the case, because you're relying upon people's donations, fund drives, sales, and things like that to raise money to run the organization that you're doing. And that can go up and down. Within the nonprofit sector setting, you have mutual aid organizations. Those are like churches, synagogues, mosques, labor unions, organizations that help their own members and also help others as well. And they may be a faith-based organization or not, but they rely upon donations and that type of thing to help their own members, and sometimes beyond their own members as well. Another subpart of the nonprofit or voluntary sector setting is private nonprofit agencies. These you might be a little more familiar with. These are organizations that have the 501c3 status from the IRS, that if people give a financial contribution to, it's tax deductible. These nonprofit agencies have people, they have budgets, they get grants, they have fundraisers, they have paid staff. They run all kinds of great programs for many different types of situations, but at the end of the year, they don't end up with extra money. They don't end up with profit that then they distribute among their members or among the board of directors or anything like that. They have no profit, and hence they're private nonprofit agencies. And they do a tremendous amount of work throughout the United States. Then we have the business sector setting. These are for-profit organizations doing the same work, helping the same issues and the same problems, but they're put together as businesses so that at the end of the day, at the end of the year, after they have served all their clientele, they have money that remains, which is profit. And that money goes back to the owner or owners of the business. A completely legitimate way also to help out people as well. It's just a different form or expression of that. So there is the governmental sector setting, the nonprofit or voluntary sector setting, and the business sector setting. Be sure you know each one of those. Another thing too, a lot of social work is done really at the agency level, and there's a couple of key things I want to mention that impact work at the agency level. And that's that you'll read that there's both horizontal influences and vertical influences. Now, horizontal influences is how an agency is impacted and influenced by other agencies who are similar to them within any given community. And hopefully there'll be positive relationships between organizations, and there'll be a benefit of having those horizontal affiliations. That they do some things and work together, maybe shared staff trainings or even joint things that they do together in the community. Vertical affiliations, though, is a little bit different. Vertical affiliations is when you have a local social service agency that is part of a national agency. For instance, like the Red Cross or the YWCA or YMCA. Organizations like this, if you were to open one up, they have, the national organization has a very much a say in how things run and what you do at the local organization. Now there's some advantages to this because there's instant name recognition. Imagine if you wanted to set up a way to be able to help collect blood that's needed. If you open up a chapter or branch of the American Red Cross, you have instant name recognition. People know what that is, they have confidence in that, that's where they want to go to give blood. Well, your organization might be the ABC Blood Organization. You might have people who are just as qualified, you may do just as good or even a better job than the Red Cross, but people don't know ABC Blood Corporation. So there's advantages to having vertical affiliation, but there's disadvantages as well. Things are very much regulated. What the Red Cross does is very well defined by their national organization. What the YMCA does is very well defined. If the YMCA wants to branch off and start a private school or something, that's not going to happen. That's not part of the charter. So there's not as much flexibility. There's not as much flexibility for certain things when they would happen. Two other terms I want you to know in this chapter are efficiency and effectiveness, and the challenge that organizations face when they're trying to balance both of these things. They're both important, but sometimes they kind of compete with one another. Efficiency represents the efforts of an agency to achieve what's called the maximum output of service with the minimum input of resources. And a lot of times grant funding organizations, they want to see efficiency. They want to see how many thousands of people that you can reach with the material that you have provided them, and that funding organization is giving you the money to produce. So you can say, we produced this brochure on preventing teenage pregnancy, and with the money that the grantors gave us, we printed 10,000 brochures and we distributed 10,000 brochures. That's very efficient. But effectiveness is a different thing. Effectiveness is the degree to which you actually achieve your agency's goals. Now, if your agency's goal is to reduce teen pregnancy, well, then that's a different matter. You have very, very efficiently distributed 10,000 brochures and got them out to 50 schools. But has the rate of teenage pregnancy been impacted or not? So efficiency and effectiveness are not the same thing. So you want to be sure to to be aware of both of those things. Also, there's a couple of sections in this book that talks about sometimes the struggle of a professional working within a bureaucratic system. And there are, again, some challenges. There's some positive things, but there's also some negative things between a person who's a professional working in a bureaucratic agency. Read those sections. And then also, the last thing I want to talk about is private practice of social workers. So here we have a practice setting where an individual social worker has gotten their license, they've done the work that they've needed to do, and they have a business. They're in the business world. And, they practice counseling or therapy. Well, there's different expressions of private practice, and there are a number of social workers that's their full-time job. They're in private practice. But there's different expressions of it. There is group practice, which is where if I'm a social worker, I might be with a group of people. One is a chiropractor, one is a nurse, one is a psychologist. We've gone in together to form a group practice. We're co-owners. Each of us has to kick in for the bookkeeping, for the rent, for the utilities, but you are a co-owner. That's group practice. The second one is supportive practice. That's where maybe there's a doctor, he's running his own practice, and he contracts with me as a social worker to come in for 10 hours a week and meet with certain patients that he believes needs to meet with a social worker. So I'm not a co-owner of the business. I just come in, I get paid on a contract basis. I don't have to kick in for the lights and the utilities and the rent. But I'm in business still for myself. I'm contracted, and I might be contracted with 4 or 5 different doctors. Then the third expression of private practice is maybe what you might be more familiar with is the sole owner. That's where I have the business myself. I'm not in a group practice. I'm not contracted out to anybody, but I have 30 or 40 or 50 clients. I see them. I may have a part-time bookkeeper, an appointment secretary, and that has its advantages and disadvantages as well. Private practice, you're usually going to make a higher wage than you're just working at an agency, especially if you're in your early years of your professional career. There's also disadvantages as well. You bear the sole responsibility for all those clients that you have. You have to make accommodations for them. You have to be sure to set up backup for if you should be unavailable, if you're traveling or on vacation. You have to carry, certainly have to carry liability insurance. And so with each of these, there is advantages and disadvantages. So as you go through this chapter, this will be the only video that we have on this. I've just hit some of the highlights. Know those different practice settings. Know about the private practice and the different expressions of that, and know about how the role of a professional within a bureaucratic system can be very challenging. All right, that's it.